Vinland Saga does what no other story I have ever read has the ability to do. In Vinland Saga's best arc and the focus of its second season, Farmland, Yukimura takes the story in an entirely new direction. Unlike the violence-fueled revenge tale of the prologue, Farmland centers around passive, directionless Thorfinn. Farmland seeks to reject the very thing that made Vinland Saga exciting in the first place: violence. Yukimura recognizes that he cannot critique violence while having his characters indulge in it for the sake of creating excitement in the reader. A story that gained its popularity through the story-altering, action-packed moments, Yukimura takes a deep look at the ideas he's presenting and the vehicle he has used to make those arguments. And he makes the ultimate narrative decision, having Thorfinn reject violence outright, something that very few, if any, other stories have the balls to do. If you enjoy this video, consider supporting my Patreon. Modern media has an issue with irony. Can stories truly critique an issue when they have to indulge in that same thing? The most sophisticated creators tend to leave questions unanswered for this very reason. If they gave an answer, it would be inherently reductive, for they used those exact things to tell their story. This is essentially every single movie you have ever seen that offers up a critique on capitalism. Nothing like watching a movie tell you not to be thirsty for money when you had to pay $20 to get your ticket and double that on concessions. In recent years, with films especially, this irony has gotten to a hilarious level. Look no further than the biggest movie of all time having a message about saving the planet when the film itself is created entirely through visual effects. The greed of the film's antagonists mirrored by a movie that needs to gross $1 billion just to net even. Attack on Titan detractors have used similar claims that Isayama's critiques of war and fascism are undercut by the exciting action sequences. However, the criticisms I just presented are actually pretty unfair. When I leave Avatar, I still think saving the planet's a pretty good idea. Watching Attack on Titan, it's obvious that war is bad. These ironies are inevitable because we wouldn't want to go to a movie and not see some action. What we are experiencing in those moments is fiction and should be treated as such. But this is where Farmland takes up what is thought to be an impossible challenge. Farmland decides to forego the main reason it gained viewership for thematic exploration. The prologue made its living in those action sequences, many of which resulted in major characters dying. Thorfinn's blinded revenge creates a wake of people who will eventually seek out revenge on him. But we love it. When Thorfinn pushes himself too far and fights Thorkel, we revel in his destructive nature. We want to see him finally best Askeladd and fulfill his revenge. Revenge and violence is how Yukimura hooked us in. And then Farmland flips that narrative on its head. A narrative change this drastic only works if the seeds have been planted for a very long time that the story could go in this direction. From the first time that Thors tells Thorfinn that he has no enemies, we knew that we would eventually make it to the ideas presented in Farmland. Now Thorfinn is haunted by the things that made us excited in the beginning of the story. With every battle survived, Thorfinn leveled up his abilities, and it was so much fun watching that happen. Every person's life he took was a step closer to the goal of killing Askeladd. Violence was used as the vehicle for all character development. With each battle that Thorfinn made his way through, it became easy to justify his actions. If he ever wanted to fulfill his revenge, he needed to get strong, so he started to kill as much as possible. The world Yukimura presents fits in with Thorfinn's pursuit. Everyone, except Thors, is thirsty for battle and wants to prove themselves as a warrior. They live in lands that are plagued by war, and their culture forces them to kill and become strong or they will be tossed aside. The climax of the prologue is a bloody affair with the death of the king and Askeladd, with the goal of getting Canute taking the throne. A violent outburst as the climax of the prologue is fitting, and the downfall for Thorfinn, whose pursuit of revenge was taken away from him in a flash, culminates in Farmland. Vinland Saga reframes itself with the death of Askeladd through the introduction and point of view of Einar. Einar has recently been sold into slavery, but even so, he still has an optimism about the world. As he makes his way through the new fields he will be working in, he meets Thorfinn for the first time. Thorfinn is unrecognizable to who he was during the prologue. When we are first reintroduced to Thorfinn, we instantly know what he has been doing over this passage of time. We don't need an explanation, it's obvious right away how Thorfinn has spent this time. Without the goal of revenge, he has turned into a hollow person. He has no goal or ambition outside of just waking up and doing the tasks given to him by his master. This is the other end of a life whose only purpose was a goal. Haunted by the mistakes he made as a warrior, Thorfinn relives the horrors of what he has done every night when he sleeps. Thorfinn would have gone on the rest of his life, mindlessly working during the day and haunted by guilt at night, but instead Einar is able to pull him out of it. Einar's enthusiasm is infectious as he slowly gets to know Thorfinn, and they start working towards the goal of turning an entire forest into farmable land. Yukimura depicts all of the scenery and physical labor as glorious, while outside of it their village is surrounded by wannabe soldiers claiming to be warriors. Even when Thorfinn disappears from it all, he still isn't able to escape the violent world that turned him into this. This creates an expectation from the reader. These side characters talk a big game about how strong they are, but we all know Thorfinn could best them in combat with no issue. Even though Thorfinn is visibly suffering from the things he has done, we are thirsting for him to revert back to his old self and knock these fools out. That expectation is one of the ways Yukimura is able to keep Farmland engaging without giving us a fight every chapter. While we wait for Thorfinn to snap, he ups his investment in farming. He and Einar make strides to transform the forest. Thorfinn channels the physical skills he gained in the prologue into something good. It is a fantastic payoff for our investment in his physical skills and shows us that warriors don't need to engage in violence to prove themselves useful. For the first time in the story, things are looking up for Thorfinn. Einar has become his first friend since he was a child, and they have finally turned the corner in their work. We aren't sure what Thorfinn will do once he gets his freedom, but it's just nice seeing him have a new goal, and one that is as noble as this. Then the crops he and Einar worked so hard to grow are destroyed. Einar vows that he will kill whoever did this, and on their way back, they run into the culprits. If there was any moment where we wanted Thorfinn to snap, this is it. We want to see him show these fools how strong he is, and he does. Without thinking, Thorfinn for a moment turns back into the warrior that he used to be, and a few moments later, you can see the regret on his face. And then after being knocked out, he finds himself in his dreams. With one punch, he embraced the warrior within him, and it sent him back to the pit of violence that all warriors live in. Thorfinn has a choice: fall back into his old ways, or climb out with the memory of those you have killed and refuse to ever give in to violence again. Thorfinn wakes up and tells Einar that he will never commit violence again. Once he is free, he will search out the place his father wanted to take him. He will find Vinland. The story from this point on is governed by a different set of rules in the prologue. Even though characters like Canute and Thorkel are still prominent in the narrative, the excitement of action scenes is used far less because of Thorfinn's motivation to be a better person. Yukimura took the necessary precautions to explore the negative effects of violence. No single piece of art can take on an idea fully because art doesn't equal action. This is why irony isn't really a big deal when discussing art, because fiction will always be separated from reality. With that being said, Yukimura takes a hard look at the way his story was told and uses that to help convey his message in a way that gets a different kind of reaction out of readers. He brings notice to this irony and gives the story the respect it needs to convey this kind of rejection of violence. It is a big risk to forego the simplest way to get your audience invested in your story. It shows that the readers don't need an overload of violence to stay engaged, and while great action scenes can be a massive appeal to stories, if you want to fully critique the negative impacts of something like violence, Thorfinn should be revered as one of the best examples of that in fiction. It is the way that Yukimura abandons Thorfinn's longing for violence that puts Vinland Saga in a different status. The goal of removing as much irony from the narrative as possible is the only way Yukimura was able to fully bring to light the idea that to be a true warrior is understanding that no one in the world has any enemies. If you enjoy this video, please consider checking out my Patreon. If you want to see my thoughts as Season 2 of Vinland Saga is airing, follow me on Twitter at AnnieEssays. Hope to see you in the next one.